I hope you all are having a wonderful day. My name is Yupari, and I'd like to invite you into this portrait drawing demonstration. And in this portrait drawing demo, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on the abstract. So I'm going to focus a little more in the realm of abstraction and how the use of abstract shapes and patterns can develop a very naturalistic looking image. So let's go ahead and get started here. So we're working on just a regular piece of toned pastel paper, and we're going to just be using charcoal. And if you want to know exactly what materials I'll be using, you can go ahead and scroll down to the description box below, and I'll have all that information typed up for you. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mark for the top of the head and the bottom of the head. Just 2 marks for now, just trying to kind of get an idea of the placement of the head. Now we're going to be focusing on the large abstract. So let's go ahead and just block in a little shape here, just a simple geometric shape. Now I'm not thinking at all in terms of the likeness of the model, who the model may be, or anything. I'm not thinking of anything other than just shape. This is an oval, rectangular looking shape. This is a kind of cylinder here. And then this is just kind of like a little triangle. Very, very simple in nature. So now let's go ahead and put in a little shape here. Kind of like a little rainbow on the top, why not? And let's just block in a little shape there. And here we have a little rectangular looking shape for the outside. And then some little shapes here. Optically, this angle is somewhat like this and wraps in like that. Then we have a little triangular looking shape right about there. Notice how I'm not mentioning anything about saying like, okay, here's the angle for the mandible going across the side plane of the face. I'm not really mentioning that at this point. Of course, I'll get into that, but we're just thinking abstraction, large abstraction. So let's go ahead and just observe this simple little shadow shape that we have here. See that? There's a large shadow here, and this is what we kind of see at a glance. This is a peripheral view. So this is kind of what we see in the periphery when we're looking at the side, like kind of glancing at the side of your eye. If that makes any sense, just looking at a glance, not really trying to get all of the little nuances of the portrait, but rather just trying to get the large underlying design. Little dark shape here. And here we have just a simple little angle. Simple little angle there. Notice how freely I'm moving my hand about this. I'm about an arm's length away. So this is going to divide the center of this shape. So this is telling me that I'm seeing a little bit more of this side of this shape than I'm seeing of this side. That's all that this center line is telling me, and it's also kind of telling me that there's kind of a turn in this kind of fashion. Let's go ahead and just make a little mark here for where the nose might fit. I'm not entirely sure where anything is going to fit yet, but just making simple observations. And why don't we just go ahead and just put in a little shadow there. Little shape down here. Trying to observe the nature of these shapes. Not really trying to copy them. Trying to interpret the visual information and make decisions based off of that. Here we have a little kind of rectangular looking shape here. Right here. So let's just observe what the shape is, and then we'll think about it in terms of anatomical structure later. Let's just use our eye, just starting this off by perception. simple little dark shape there. And I see a simple little dark shape here. Just filling in these large masses. This is a very painterly way of starting a drawing. And charcoal itself is a very painterly medium. Painterly meaning that it's very much, it handles very similarly to that of oil paint. So the handling is very similar to oil paint. Little shape there. And let's see, this shape probably comes out about there. And then we have another little rectangular shape here. Let's relate one side to the other side. And there's a lot of dark here. A lot of dark. And especially in portrait, don't be afraid of the start. Don't have any hesitation in the start. Portrait, or basically a representational art, there are so many ways to approach it that, you know, it doesn't really matter if in the beginning it looks like the hair, like there's a almost, I don't know if you've seen Johnny Bravo, the cartoon, like it's okay if this looks like Johnny Bravo or something like that in the beginning. By the way, that was one of my favorite cartoons growing up. I would watch that on Cartoon Network. But anyway, so now we're starting to carve out the outside shape. We don't even have to know what we're looking at. Just looking at a glance at the outside shape. Just using simple abstract patterns. Notice how we're following this angle here. Goes down, goes out here, and then large line coming all the way down there. Let's put in a little dark shape here. No fear, no hesitation. That's the goal. And you know what? This dark shape here, this little dark rectangular shape here, might have to move up. As a consequence, this one will move up too. Let's go ahead and just go and reestablish this angle here. Angle comes out a little more. And we have a little dark shape right there. A little dark accent there, dark accent here. No hesitation whatsoever. Little accent there. There's even a little, looks like a little nuance to this line going in like this, going down like that, then going all over here. Now let's go ahead and get our trusty stump and start to kind of mush the charcoal into the paper. And in doing so, we're also going to kind of progress to the next stage of this drawing, which will be just observing large masses of light and dark. Just large masses of light and dark. And we're working very optically today, very perceptual. No measuring needed. So let's create a little edge here. Use the stump for this. Stump all of this. Let's try to preserve that little angle that we made earlier. And again, this is a very painterly approach. This is very similar to some the way I would start some of my portrait painting videos. Little angle change there, and this dark shape comes out a little further. And now let's start to think about the idea of observing the large mask of the portrait. Now, I just threw in the word portrait, which means now we're moving from the simple abstract pattern, which is what you're observing now, and we're going to make it a little more lifelike. So we're going to think about just simple patterns of light and dark. So this right here is a chamois. This is a chamois cloth, and what it does is it basically erases for me. So I'm going to be moving back and forth between the chamois and the stump. So let's go ahead and create this shape here. Almost looks like a little baseball, what do you even call it? See, I don't play baseball, so I don't know. But it's the little platform where you run around when you're playing baseball. The only reason I know is because when I was kind of, let's see, I think I was in the 4th grade in PE class, we were running around and I kind of smashed into one of those little baseball looking shapes. But anyway, I'm using the chamois cloth to create the shape that I'm observing. Switching back to the stump, I'm going to be adding in a little value, a little plane change there. So again, we're looking at the large patterns of light and dark, and we're also looking now into the structure of the mask. So we're thinking of the mask of the portrait now. So this dark shape, it's a little lighter over here. So notice I have 2 sides to my stump. So this is the dark side, this is the light side of the stump. So with the light side, I tend to take some of the charcoal off with this. And then notice how I can subtract a little bit with it. That's the goal, to be able to just work very quickly. And for today, I'm not really going to be sharpening my charcoal. We're going to just keep it kind of like a stump. I have a couple pieces of charcoal here with me. So if in case I run out of this one, I have some more that are readily available for me. Let's go ahead and subtract a little bit there. Now let's go ahead and subtract a little bit on this side with the light side of the stump. Observing just shape. So I noticed that this shape here is a little bit lighter, this shape here is a little darker, and both of these shapes have a relation to one another such that they're in an angle in relation to one another. Now then, I see that there is a little bit of a softer edge over here. And I'm going to go ahead and just adjust that shape now with the chamois cloth. I'm going to do the same kind of thing over here. Just going to stump that in there. And again, just kind of soften this little boundary. Very simple and easy. Let's create a little tone here while we're at it. So we're creating a little side plane for this large structure. Now let's go ahead with the chamois cloth and subtract. Just subtracting a little bit and just observing this entire abstract shape. That's all I'm doing is observing the shapes. Now let's go ahead and just make a large simple shape here for the cast shadow of the nose. Let's add a little more charcoal to it. I want this shape to be even darker. Still very much a simple abstract shape. Notice that's pretty much a rectangle. Just a rectangle. There's even a little plane change here. And then I'm kind of working the entire picture, so I'm also looking at the outside shape as well. This is going to carve inwards a little bit. Now then, I'm going to go ahead and make this edge a little softer with the stump. I'm going to take the clean side of the stump and try to just kind of push that shape into the paper. Very simple. Now I'm going to go back to the chamois and start to subtract a little bit from that rectangle that we started out with. Just looking at the shape. Now for the mouth, let's go ahead and just think about the muzzle of the mouth. Just think about the large shape that you're observing. So the muzzle of the mouth is basically this whole little area that contains the mouth. You could also think of it as the orbicularis oris. So now we're definitely going to be thinking a little bit about the anatomy of the portrait. The orbicularis oris, you can see pretty well defined on this model. So it's this little W looking shape here, and then you see the little light there. So let's think about the structure encompassing the mouth, and then we'll add the mouth onto that structure. So we're kind of both we're both engineers and architects when we're working with the portrait, because we're thinking about the physicality of, say, the human head and the structure involved in it, but we're also thinking of the aesthetic as well. So the design. So this shape is actually a little more flat. See that? This angle is a little more flat. Let's go ahead and just stump the rest of that in there. And this angle is pretty well defined. It's a very clear-cut angle. Now switching back to the chamois, just going to subtract a little bit there. And let's go ahead and just subtract over here. And we're just looking at the shape of this cast shadow. Not thinking about anything else, just observing visual interpretation. That shape is going like this, somewhat like this. So it's a little smaller here, and then it gets wider out here, and then it starts to make all kinds of little shapes in here. And of course we have this shape here. Let's not forget the little rectangular looking shape here. See that? I don't even have to tell you that's an ear. It's just a shape that is existing in relation to the surrounding shapes. Go ahead and just add a little value. So that's all we're doing, just adding a little bit of value to that shape that we carved. Now, structurally, let's think about the zygomatic bone, the cheekbone. So it's actually going to be protruding out a little bit more on this model. So we're going to see kind of a little angle here. So let's use the stump here to introduce the side plane. Now, of course, I may have just exaggerated it a bit too much. That's okay. We'll just come right back into it with the charcoal. Try to think about the shape of something rather than what that thing is. Even though I'm identifying it as the zygomatic bone, I may get too caught up in the anatomy of the zygomatic bone and forget just the simple appearance of the shape itself. Now then, after sitting back, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to observe shapes. This has to cut in a little bit more than what I have, and that's okay. Remember, charcoal is very forgiving. And by forgiving, I mean that you can move it very easily. See how we're going to move this shape? We're moving that shape in a little bit. Now we're going to observe a little shape right there that needs a little more charcoal. And within these large rectangular looking shapes there exists some darker shapes. So let's put them in there. One there and one here. What could these shapes be? We don't even need to know what they are. Really don't. But of course you know that they're the eyes. So we're starting to put in some information there for the eyes. Don't need much right now. Can I go back into the hair? Sorry, this dark shape here under the hat, or this just rainbow-like shape. Don't even know what to call it really. It's just a shape that goes up, curves, leans this way, then goes down. Let's go ahead and just make this darker. And that might need to move up a little more optically. So let's just do that. It's darker over here. Now using the the light area of the stump, I'm seeing a little light shape here. Simple little light shape there. Not really seeing this light shape over there, so if I don't see it, I won't put it in. Let's go ahead and put in a little dark shape here. Simple little dark shape. It also helps to squint down when you're trying to observe simple abstract shape. So once in a while, just squint your eyes and observe the image that you're looking at or the model that you're looking at a glance. That also helps to kind of see just simple shape. And there's a little dark shape here. Very simple. Another little dark shape over here. And this is going to angle like that. Now the light side of the stump we'll use to adjust this shape here. Very simple there. Now let's go ahead and, whoops, wrong side of the charcoal. Let's go ahead and just draw in a little addition to this shape here. So I see a dark shape here and a dark shape there, and these are the accents for the nostrils. This is how I'm going to start the wing of the nose. Simple little shape coming in this direction. And this goes in a little bit here, goes out there, in again, and then just meets with that shape there. And of course, I'm going to go back in with the stump. And just pushing the charcoal into the paper. Let's go ahead and let this edge get really soft. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and observe. Let's relate this side to this side. That shape is going to go in. There's going to be a shape coming in like that and out like this. somewhat like that. You don't even have to know that that's the front plane of the zygomatic bone. Just observe the nature of the shape. And now let's go ahead and just relate this shape down here. So this is a little bit sharper of an edge. And I don't know if it's true, but there's a little bit of a half tone here. Or at least it appears to me. And this is curving in, going out like that. Now for the mouth, let's go ahead and just observe that there is a dark shape here. Let's just relate that dark shape to these shapes. Maybe it can move down a little bit. So let's use the light side of the stump to help push that down. Very simple there. Moving on to the other side. Simple little dark shape here. This shape actually kind of curves in a little bit. Now with the light side of the stump, subtract a little bit of light there. It's okay if we subtract a little more than we need. It's quite all right. Remember, charcoal is very, very forgiving. Let's follow the center here. And there we have. Now I'm going to put in a little division for the middle of the lips. Still, I'm not even using very sharp charcoal. Look at this. Just trying to just use a big little shape of charcoal to kind of help kind of keep me from drawing in too many little things too quickly. You'd be surprised at the kind of image and resemblance you can get by just observing simple pattern of shape in an abstract fashion. So we're going to have a dark accent here, just a little dark shape there. For the bottom of the wing of the nose, which is also giving us a nostril. Alright, so I think this charcoal has finally expired, so I'm going to switch to another. Now just observing the dark shape itself. Let's see. It's kind of like a little triangle with a round top. That's what I'm seeing at least. It's a little dark shape on the bottom. Very simple there. Now the same thing with the other side. Again, it's kind of like a little triangle with a round top. Now let's go ahead with the stump. Dark side of the stump, just push that in. Let's also stump this in a little bit to help mold these shapes. This goes in a little more. Now then, for the eyes, let's take a look at just straight lines. Straight line here. An angle like this. And then we have the top of the curve right there. So now that we have that little shape there, let's go ahead with the stump and just push the charcoal into the paper. Just focusing on the shape of these forms. So abstracting what I'm looking at, all I have is a little shape that goes up, angles over there, maxes out up here, and then starts to curve inwards. That's all it is. And this shape has to move up a little bit. Not a problem. Now then, there's going to be a pretty predominant dark shape here. Goes in like this. Very simple. Smooth that up. And of course, that happens to be the tear duct. Let's go ahead and just reaffirm that shape there. Now this shape is a little different looking. So it's going to be pretty much, this is almost a series of rectangles and triangles really. It's kind of a little triangle that goes around like that. I never noticed how many triangles and rectangles are in portraits. There's quite a bit of them. See that? This is almost another triangle. 1, 2, 3. Let's go ahead and move this shape up as well. One of the misconceptions, at least for me, I think it's a misconception with portrait, is to think that just because there's a lot of detail in something that it's very realistic or naturalistic. Sometimes less is more is very true when it comes to the naturalistic appearance of a portrait. A little bit of a darker shape there, so let's go ahead and push that in with the stump. That is the dark side of the stump. Now with the light side of the stump, let's go and subtract a little bit there. Very simple. Now the other side, I have to relate one side to the other. What I'm noticing by squinting is that this whole shape is darker than this shape here. See this shape right there, right underneath of the eyebrow? Of course, this is the area for the eye socket, as you know. But if I'm just going to talk about abstract shapes right now, this shape here is darker than this shape. Don't even need to know what those shapes are. Of course, it helps to know what they are. A darker transition there. Now this shape actually has to come in a little bit, and so does this shape. This is actually a little more like that. Now with the stump here, we're gonna just push that shape in there. Now returning to the eye, just squinting down, I see that there's still a little more light here. And I don't mean light as in actual light, but just this value is a little bit lighter, but it's still in the shadow, so I have to make sure not to subtract too much. Now that's a little bit closer. Now let's go ahead and articulate this shape here. Now just abstract, we have a little dark shape here, a little gap here, and an angle change here. So this is the top of the curve, and here curve starts to angle down, and then even more over here starts to angle down even further. And again, once we establish that shape, we go back to our trusty dark stump. Just push that all in. This actually has to come out a little more, a little bit like that. Now then, let's observe the bottom portion of this shape. So if we go all the way down here, we have another shape that's coming out like this. So really, I'm kind of pretending like I don't know what I'm looking at. Rather, I'm just distilling it down into abstract shapes. See how we're relating the top of this shape here to the bottom of this shape here. And there's a little bit of a darker pattern over here. A little bit of a darker pattern. Who knows why, but there is a darker pattern there. And of course, I'm going to be switching back and forth between pretending like I don't know what I'm looking at and then actually telling you what I'm looking at, just so I don't confuse you. This is getting darker here because that is a plane change, and a plane change on the portrait that is angling away from the light and of course towards the zygomatic bone, which is of course the cheekbone. That's why it's gradually getting darker there. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Just soften this edge here. This is also the dark light. It is the light, it is the darkest value in the light, just as before we reach the shadow. And this little line that I've been placing in there is actually referred to as the terminator line, which terminates the shape of light from the shape of dark. And that's all. That's all there is to it. Just light and dark, and a couple tones in between. Not too complicated. Now then, while we're here, let's observe again this shape and relate it to this shape. So I see, just using a horizontal, that this needs to come down. Just needs to come down a little bit. There's a little angle here, and it starts to curve into here. And then we're going to have a dark shape over here. Little dark shape over here. Now returning to the eye, squinting down, I see that there's still a little bit of light here. A little bit. Not very much. So that's why I'm using the light side of the stump rather than the chamois to describe that light. There's also a little bit of light here. Kind of looks like a Pac-Man here, this little light shape there. See the mouth of the Pac-Man? Which of course we know is the light for the sclera of the eye. The sclera being the white of the eye, which of course we know isn't white. It's usually kind of a halftone. And now it looks like the Pac-Man is getting a little too big, so let's go ahead and just push this shape out And this shape that we're pushing out is, of course, the iris. Just a simple little shape there. And you know what? There's even a little dark shape pointing out right here. Wonder what that is. And of course, that is the tear duct to the eye on the right. Little angle change here. Excuse me. Little angle change here. Now, this might be getting scrunched. The shape, or sorry, the distance from this shape to this shape. So I think rather than move this up, I think I'm going to use the stump to push this down a little bit, and still trying to preserve the peak of the curve, which is up here. Dark shape over there. Now let's go ahead and relate this side to this side. So now the pupil over here actually needs to be a little more round to match with this one. And of course, I mixed them up again. The iris is this large one here. So right now we have the iris, and let's observe the little dark shape here. And of course, this is the pupil. Very simple. Just a little dark shape there. Now then, there still needs to be a little bit more of an angle here. So let's try to get this angle right with the terminator line. Remember, the terminator line divides the light and the shadow. And then after the terminator line, we have our dark light, which we will get very quickly by using the dark side of the stump to automatically create that tone. Very simple. Now switching back to the chamois cloth, I'm seeing that this shape still needs a little bit of tweaking. So this has to push inwards a little bit. So pushing this in. And you know what? I'm going to use the light side of the stump to push this in. There's almost a little teardrop looking shape there. Which of course is the philtrum. Now after sitting back, I see that the philtrum might be too small. So that means that either the mouth needs to come down or the nose needs to go up. So after sitting back, I see that it's probably the nose. So let's push this shape up. And this is why it's helpful to think about just abstract shape, because all I'm saying is just pushing this shape up. And it's much easier to think about it in your mind to push a shape up than it is to push a nose up. Just kind of, it helps to think about it that way. It's kind of morbid to think that you're grabbing someone's nose and moving it up. It's actually easier, at least in my mind, to process moving a shape upwards. So now we have a little more distance there for the philtrum, being this shape right here. Now we can put that little value change for the philtrum. And now it kind of makes a little more sense, at least to my eyes. And remember, we're not trying to copy what we're looking at. Well, I'm not trying to copy what I'm looking at. Rather, I'm trying to take the visual information that I'm presented with and interpret it in such a way that the shapes are reminiscent to nature. And that's all. There's a little dark shape right over here. Dark shape here in contrast to this light shape. There's even a little more light catching over here. So I'm just using the clean side of the stump to subtract a little bit. Let's go back with the charcoal. And there still needs to be a little more delineation here to this curve. So let's go ahead and use the stump to articulate that. Just pushing that shape up a little bit. Very simple. Now let's use the stump to create this little tone here. See how there's kind of a tone down here? See, that edge needs to get sharper, or sorry, softer. And we're going to take some of this charcoal and we're going to just push it into this shape here. And that'll give us the tone that we need. So let's take some of this charcoal and move it there. Very simple. I'm switching to the light side of the stump. I'm going to just even out this little shape here. And also observe that this needs to now angle in here. Now, as we're angling this little shape for the side of the mouth, we're also creating a little transitioning tone with the residue of the charcoal that we're pushing down. Very simple there. Actually needs to be a little more light here than I initially thought. So using the stump, I'm going to push that in. And even over here, this little shape here needs to turn inwards a little more. Not a problem. So we're just pushing this shape in like that. I'm going to actually use the chamois because the stump isn't picking up quite enough. So switching to the chamois. See that? Little shape there, which of course is the side of the face, side plane of the face. This is actually this shape here that we're seeing. Now it's easy to think of it in terms of abstract shape. It's just kind of a little hook shape here. But what that is it's the side of the orbicularis oris, which is the muscle right here containing the mouth. And let's take this charcoal that we're picking up on the stump and put in this little tone here. Very simple. And this tone here is just basically the plane of the cheekbone turning inwards towards the nose. But I don't want to put too much of a dark value there because of course that will kind of not be aesthetically appealing. And of course the shape just isn't really that dark on the model to begin with. Now then, I'm going to go ahead and observe now the chin. So this angle isn't quite as dramatic as I made it in the beginning. So let's go ahead with the dark side of the stump. Just adjust the terminator line. Now remember, the terminator is the basically termination of light into shadow. Now using the light side of the stump, see how we're going to create this transitioning tone? Super simple. And at the same time, we're also creating the dark light as we're adjusting the terminator line. It's the beauty of charcoal. So one little tip to help you out with portrait painting, if you're trying to improve on your portrait painting skills, or even get into portrait painting, even if you've never painted before, this technique relies on basically just two values primarily, light and shadow, and then we have the dark lights, and then just a little halftone. So really it's just basically 4 values, maybe 5 at the most, and do the most you can with just those values. And then the image that you get out of this should be kind of your guide with your oil paintings. And charcoal on its own is just much more forgiving than oil paint, in my opinion. Oil paint takes a while. You have to mix your colors. You have to use your medium. You have to think about your brushes. And this, it's not as intricate. So let's sharpen this shape here. Now I see that perhaps I exaggerated this line here. So let's go ahead and move this line this way. And there's even a little shape here. Little light shape there. Very simple. Now I'm going to relate again the nose, so the bottom of this shape, to this shape. So basically, this shape has to come down. And again, super flexible. It's a little closer, and there's even a little glimpse of light here. Who knows what this shape is? But of course I'm pretending. This light shape here is the tragus of the ear, right there. And the tragus of the ear basically helps connect the ear to the side plane of the face. And how does it connect? Here's the tragus. There's also a little area on the skull where this kind of overlaps. And then right next to it you have the cheekbone. So that's how it connects. Of course, I'm not an anatomist, so I can't tell you exactly how that works in the human physiology. So there's a little dark shape here and over here, and even a little dark shape over here. Just looking at those simple little patterns. So let's stump that in there. Put in a little dark shape here. Stump that shape. Now going back to the charcoal, that goes out a little more. Now with the clean side of the stump, I see a little bit of light here. So actually now relating this shape to here, the ear is getting a little big, which is fine. just push that down. So let's just directly relate this shape to this shape and push that down. Very simple. Now what we're going to do is address the background. So I have the choice of either leaving it like this or putting in a value in the background. And I just think that I want a value in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and just start to push in this dark value. And I just think that it gives a type of, I don't know, type of contrast when you make your marks in the background in this kind of direction. See how the texture of the charcoal kind of contrasts with the texture of the charcoal in the flesh tones? That is the values in the flesh. So let's go ahead and just fill in the rest of this now. Now that we have this value in the background, let's just go ahead and put some more information for the clothing that the model's wearing. So let's go ahead and take the chamois, subtract a little bit of light there, go back to the charcoal, observe that there's a little shape here. The shape cuts in a little bit like that. Now with the chamois, simply just pull down. Now I'm going to go ahead with the chamois and flatten this out. I think the angle is a little more like that. So let's just flatten that out. Don't need much. Tell you what, I'm going to go back with the background value and just kind of let this overlap. By the way, the background, the little piece of charcoal I used was soft vine charcoal. I believe from the Winsor Newton brand. But again, for the majority of this, I used Fusains Nitram. But in any case, all of the materials that I used in this video, will be listed in the description box for you. All right, so now I'm just going to make an aesthetic decision as to how much information I want to put for the clothing. So there's a little shape here. So let's see, it kind of angles in like this. Something like that. Just fill that in. And I think that's good enough for that. Now I see that there's a little shape here, goes in, out like that. Let's see, a little bit of light hitting here. So in, down, out, over, something like that. Just thinking of the abstract shape, something like that. Let's put a little shape there. Now let's just fill this in. Let's even put this little shape here, why not? Very simple. Let's just soften this edge here. Now with the little kneaded eraser, I'm just going to go ahead and establish this edge here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and soften some of these little edges here. This gets a little darker in here. Just want to soften the edges. And this should be just about the last things. These should be just about the last adjustments I'll make into this charcoal portrait. And with that, we have the conclusion of this portrait drawing demonstration. I really hope that this video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one.